So these are both related to 201 Sabine, and they are both not a final act on behalf of council, but they are both sort of information gathering or our attempts to learn the value of the property that we have, were we to sell it, and the value of subdividing the property. Here's a picture of one of the potential subdivision plans. So what we're discussing today for the first item is whether to have an appraisal done of this potential subdivision to know what the value would be if we were to actually subdivide and then sell it. That would be information gathering at this point.
Right, so Pinoni has created for us 3 separate options for a potential subdivision. So it would be 1 acre, 1.5 acre, and 2 acre options. The area that would be proposed as part of the subdivision, again, this is mainly conceptual, but it would be the area in red. So that would be the area that would be perceived as being subdivided from the balance of the property. You can see on there we do have the right-of-way lines identified. It's a little hard to read all the way back here what those dash lines are, but the right-of-way lines and then the building envelope to give a sense of what the area would be that an actual structure could be located within that area. So if we want to scroll to the next one, so you can see just the increase in the area. So the line shifts over. The consideration for these lines also took into account the potential need for access to that site along Montgomery Avenue. If a development were to come in up there, it would need potentially separate access either on Montgomery Avenue or on Sabine. So the orientation of the subdivision lines would create the opportunity to have some sort of access, and it would obviously need to meet, any future development would need to meet all subdivision land development ordinance regulations, zoning regulations, and so on and so forth. So from a traffic safety and ingress and egress, that is all very conceptual and not really able to be discussed at this time because we don't actually have anything to review. But the intent of this is just to show how much acreage then would be kind of remaining in the event that we were to do a subdivision along the frontage of the property along Montgomery Avenue. So if there's interest then from council, the next step would be, yes, we could seek an appraisal of these options, and then that would be, you know, if there's an option in particular you wanted to pursue, or if you wanted to have an appraisal of all 3 of the options, as that would change the valuation of the property given its acreage.
And I'll just note that in this concept, the rest of the space would be greened. The plan would be to take down the existing buildings and, to the extent possible, make the rest of the space green space. And all of this would result in more green space than the current setup, which is 0.75 acres. It's less than an acre. What's that? It's less than an acre of current green space on the site. So just to explain to members of the public what you might be seeing. The idea would be to keep the development on Montgomery, which is busier, which has similar sized projects around it, and keep the part that is adjacent to the residential area more, make the green space, bring the green space over there. Council members.
Can you just remind me what the total acreage of the lot is, so that if this does increase, I don't have a sense of how much of an increase of parkland each of these would result in.
Adding it together, looks like it's 3.3.
Yeah. Tony, do you have numbers?
No, but I don't know what
Any
the
option is
current.
more than doubling it.
3.3 is the
For the whole
parcel,
total lot.
that's the
Total lot.
total lot. No, I'm
Yeah.
saying how much more of an increase in parkland space.
So if the
Each
current
one
park
is-
is 0.75,
Yeah.
it looks like the
Okay.
worst case scenario, like selling off 2 acres, will leave 1.58 acres. So,
Yeah, well, there would have to be access, presumably. or something.
Yeah, well, that's the right of way, right? So,
okay, 1.3 acres.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So it doubles it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, the broad concept here is that we're in a fact-finding mode.
Yeah.
Right? And then just kind of previewing the next item, but it makes sense to me that in order to actually have a policy conversation about where to head, I'm a big believer in having informed policymaking. And so being able to actually get some baseline understanding of the site, I think is important so that we can actually start to think through this as a body. And I think about that in a number of ways, but in this way, that also makes a lot of sense to me.
I just, you know, I want to be really clear on a couple of things here because, you know, we've talked about getting an assessment of the property and I think the public has made assumptions about what that means. And so I want to be forthright about this. I was the one who first suggested that we get an assessment of the property because quite frankly, in my view, depending on what those assessments look like, if they're not going to bring significant revenue to the borough, I have no interest in selling off the property. You know, and I think I said this, you know, if it gets us $500,000, that's a lot different than if it gets us $5 million or $50 million. And I was the one who wanted to do this because I think it's going to come in low and it's going to influence my view of whether I would be in favor of any development of the property or sale of the property at all. And, you know, I think there's been a lot of misapprehension in the public on why we were doing this and what the motivation was. And I'm just putting it out there that this was my idea initially, not because I think that this leads to any particular outcome, and in fact, probably would influence me, you know, if I think we have a duty to weigh the fiduciary impact or fiduciary duty to weigh the impact of not having the revenue source for the school. But I also recognize that once you develop a property, it's forever. And it's gonna, you know, the forever part really bothers me. And I'm gonna take that part very seriously. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I would gladly donate a big portion of it to the borough to tear down the building and make this a park.
Well, you know, Puff Gallery, they do sell
Oh.
tickets. Big sign that somebody won last year.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
Good deal.
Well, you know, the Narberth Spotlight says, you know,
That's
if I
right.
won the lottery, this is what I would do.
Duly noted.
So, anyway, I just wanted to get that out there because, again, I was the one who first suggested that we get the assessment, and I think people made it the assumption that we were doing that for a particular outcome, and that's 100% not the case. At least, I can't speak for why everybody else agreed with me, but that's why I proposed it in the first place.
Ira?
So, are we putting any restrictions when they do the assessment? They're assuming that the person can buy it and build on it whatever is allowed by zoning, right?
I think we should assume that, I mean, if we have these assessments done, I would propose that it be zoned, that we treat it as if it were zoned with the rest of Montgomery Avenue, which is, what is that? 5B? Yeah, so, you know, the strip of Montgomery running right up to the park is all 5B. So I would propose that that would be the logical zoning category.
So
for
it could be
this.
some combination of commercial and residential, or it has to be all commercial or all residential?
I think either would be allowed. I think mixed use is allowed. I mean, it's,
Apparently mixed use is required in 5B.
Yeah.
mixed use is required.
Higher.
Are you
Yes.
sure?
I'm
Because
positive.
But if you're going to have residential, you have to have commercial.
You have to have ground floor commercial in 5B and 5A.
okay,
I guess the point I'm trying
sorry. Go ahead, Ira.
to get at is that the person doing the assessment should assume that the zoning doesn't change.
I'm saying that we would, if we did this, we would likely zone this as 5B, which is the rest of Montgomery. I don't believe it is currently zoned 5B.
There'd be there's no direction right now in that regard.
But I mean, the person doing the assessment would have to know if they should be assessing it as though it could be rezoned and like to be all residential, for example, which would probably increase the price.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying.
I
wanna
would
give clear
propose that
direction.
when we have it assessed, we give them the direction that it would be zoned 5B, which is, again, the bordering zoning. I mean, I'm open to suggestions otherwise, but that
Well,
would be my.
the only reason I bring it up is because it's gonna change the price,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
lot.
If they can put up an apartment versus a mixed
Right.
use.
Would
So,
we
I
be able
mean-
to infer the assessment, you know, for all residential, if it were to stay all residential?
I mean, how is it zoned right now?
3B.
3B,
Which is,
It's
Yeah.
currently zoned,
which is
And what
what?
is
Which is one of the
what is that?
residential.
which is probably the district that a lot of folks here live in.
it's, yeah, like it's mostly single family, so.
So
it
it
would
couldn't,
not-
but it couldn't be an apartment building, or?
It can't be a lot of things. It can't be a business, I don't think, in 3B. I mean, you can do a home-based
Okay, well-
There's
business.
various things.
3B is like a residential
Okay.
neighborhood, so 3B was what you'd
Okay,
see.
well, I'm not an expert on what the different zonings are, I'm just telling you that the directions you give to the assessor are very important,
Absolutely.
because it could be double the price,
Yeah.
depending on what instructions you give.
So maybe we need to say, assess at 3B and 5B.
We're not gonna assess it as 3B. There's no point in offering a developer a 3B property, which would all be, I don't even know what they could put on that, but I don't feel that that is,
Because it's too.
we are not proposing to turn this into more single-family houses, right? That is not council's goal. That would be, if we declared it 3B, then that is about all that could be built there, and I do not think there would be sufficient value of selling the property. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to sell it for,
Does the, I'm sorry, and again, I don't know this, is that kind of missing middle, the little cottages, the quads, is that 3B?
We don't have that at all right now, so.
3B is most of the borough is zone 3B. Most of the residential areas of the borough are zone 3B.
So wait, we were just talking about this is possible to do kind of the smaller, first-time home buyer.
Right.
I don't think we want to foreclose the idea, you know, if we're going to open this up, we ought to at least have the possibility of a commercial property. I don't think it makes sense to open this up to,
But
I think that if we're gonna end up, and I don't know that this is right, it seems like we're not ready to have this specific conversation, but I would suggest that, and if we are, then that's fine. But when it does come to the point where we wanna figure that out, I would suggest that there be a compelling policy interest in whatever we would wanna actually see on that, since we currently control.
And then the question becomes, do you tell the assessor to assess it with different usage types? Rather than picking one, because you don't necessarily know which one is where
Yeah,
it's more valuable. I
Yeah.
mean, in some ways, you might want to have them assess it at, where the maximal value would
Yeah.
be.
right.
I think we
Yeah.
have to do something, I mean, we have got to do something on Sabine. The idea of saying, give us 3 different zoning assessments, if that does not radically increase the cost of the assessment, I think those are valuable data for us to have.
Well, we have to at least give them some direction on this.
Clearly
I think
not.
in the lack of,
let's pause for a
yeah.
second. Let's see if Maggie has I see you're furiously writing down here. Do you have a suggestion for how to proceed here? What might be the best way to get a reasonable assessment? I think ultimately, if the assessment doesn't help us, or if it's just, if they're not able to come up with a useful number,
Yeah,
then
I
it's a
mean,
waste of our time.
I think the first decision is which parcel would you like to spend the money on having priced? And then there will need to be information given to the appraiser of what the highest and best use for that property is. So those are 2 decisions that we're going to need to have.
Okay.
Oh, wait, we're picking one of these scenarios to send out for
Well,
assessment? Is that-
I think that the discussion is you could pick all 3 and say, hey, we want to know what all 3 are worth. We don't want to do this one, so let's just do these. You're not choosing them, you're just saying which one is worth pursuing, spending a little bit more money to look into that option.
All right,
But the more parameters you apply,
the more expensive.
the more expensive the appraisal will be. So it behooves us to narrow down 1 or 2 options that you want to have appraised, as opposed to having everything appraised, because then the appraisal costs themselves will go up dramatically.
There is a chicken and egg problem in terms of the use that you're giving them may also affect whether it's actually viable on a site of a different size.
Right, and so the initial assessment, part of what Pranoni looked at was that any of these parcel sizes, you could still fit a building, so the 5A district. So if we, just as a comparable, right, if you take the building footprint at 650 Montgomery Avenue, would fit within the 1 acreage site concept, based on the East Shore. Is that right, Tony? Am I correct in
Yeah.
saying that?
Yeah, there's enough buildable area to where a building that's in similar size to 650 Montgomery would fit within that footprint and still have, enough parking and enough, area for stormwater management, things like that. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how big the property is, what can fit on it, and then, it only gets bigger from there.
So in that light, I would like to suggest that we do not ask for an assessment on the biggest
Yeah.
split, because
I'm with you.
that's
Yeah.
more than half development, less than half park, which I think is, especially hearing that there's a viable development project
Yeah.
that was built right now on a smaller footprint. I don't see the reason.
Yeah.
I agree with
I
you.
agree with that too, Fred. That
Okay,
maximizes
I'm
green
hearing
space. Yeah.
that's the majority of council. Get rid of the biggest one.
Yeah,
Okay.
If you just need to do one, you could always do the middle one. You probably have some sense of what the lower one might be at and what the bigger, in terms of if you're trying to get a point of reference.
Anybody opinions on doing the other two versus doing just one? I mean, I think the cost is,
Yeah, I guess.
they said like, if you do one, it's like 3,400, the second one is 1,500 more or
Yeah.
something.
Oh.
so-
wait, Fred, Michael, you're not saying do two, you're saying do the middle one and then we can extrapolate.
Yeah.
I
If
am
we have
hearing
a
that.
good one,
I'm
yeah.
seeing if that's what council wants.
He's saying that
That's
the
like that.
second one is just, would only be $1,500 more.
1750.
1,750 more. Yeah.
1750
So most of the
more.
money is for the
I
first.
wouldn't mind seeing the smallest. and
Yeah, but now it depends on, the other variable is how many building types.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, would
So,
it be valuable to do the middle version with the two different uses? Or with the two different zoning? Then that would give us some information
Yeah.
to work on.
I guess my concern is, not everybody's in this meeting tonight. If you only do one, I know what's gonna happen. People are gonna assume that we're set on that much, and that's not the case at all, And so I'd rather spend a little extra money to see the smallest footprint, quite frankly, so that people can see the value and the cost to us as a borough. I think more information in this particular project that's so important to the community, to spend an extra $1,700 is nothing.
I've heard from you guys, I just want to hear from people who haven't spoken. So Cindy, Ira, Jen.
I would say that we spend the money on the park with the smallest development footprint, so drawing number one, because we're committed to enhancing that green space. And Tony, I can't visualize these. So when you're saying 650 Montgomery can fit on the smallest drawing allocation, that shocks me.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it kind
Yeah.
of shocked us too, honestly. We
Okay.
kind of looked at it like, wow, this will,
Yeah.
this will fit. And
I
this,
would- That really is helpful for me to know. So I would not be interested in looking at two or three. I would look at this first one.
Okay.
And that comparison includes the parking lot.
Yeah,
And
includes parking,
stormwater.
includes some area for stormwater management, yeah.
Right. Ira, Jen?
So if we only ask for one, the idea of inferring another one, would that be reliable? Is that, if we only get an assessment for the middle one or the smallest one, and we want to, just infer what the value of the one we don't ask for would be? Do people do that? Is that a reliable thing to do?
If I can speculate here a little bit, I think that probably no, it's not a one-for-one, it's not like, well, you can get X amount of dollar per square foot, because now you start changing the area of retail. If you are looking at a mixed use with apartments, it changes that mix calculation. The more square foot area you have for the building, the more parking you have, the more parking, the more impervious, the more
Yeah.
impervious, the more stormwater. So there's not a kind of linear
Right.
connection between square foot area of a parcel versus a valuation.
Right, but would we even know whether additional acreage is a diminishing return or an expanding return? You know, like,
Yeah, not having any expertise in this area whatsoever, I couldn't really speculate on that. Really, the only way to know would be to have the appraisal done. So again, we can get accurate numbers from the consultant who would do the appraisal if we gave specific parameters to say if you were to do an evaluation of scenario A, scenario B, scenario C, how much would that appraisal cost us? And we can have add-alts if that's what you want to pursue. But again, I would recommend picking, kind of honing in on specifically what you want so that we can get an accurate estimation of how much the appraisal will cost us. And then once the appraisal is done, then we can compare, if you wanted to compare, you know, option A, the 1 acre versus the 1.5 acre, and then if you wanted to do residential only versus the corridor, the Montgomery corridor zoning. But again, the more options you add to the request for appraisal, it essentially restarts from zero. It's not like you can take that and then just kind of apply it, because they go through some calculation of max build out and all of these other things to figure out what would actually be that cost for highest and best use. So I don't think that I would recommend to do 2 different options and the 2 different zoning districts on those 2 options, because that would give us at least 4 options, and that starts to get costly from an appraisal standpoint. So I think it would be important to kind of hone in on what the land use goals are for this site, and then hone in on 1 or 2 options. So either pick a size and do 2 zoning districts, or pick a zoning district and pick 2 sizes.
So I'm hearing,
There wa- and not to jump ahead, but there was a discussion about having it appraised as is, but we adapted the reuse of the building as well. So that was also an appraisal.
Right.
that's coming
That
next.
was our,
So
Yeah.
that would be something
Yeah.
else that would be a
Yeah.
cost to this conversation.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so I'm hearing a desire to hear appraisals for 2 separate sizes. I'm hearing desire from Cindy.
no,
for
no,
the
that's
small.
not mine.
No, she wants
No,
to switch.
I'm on side,
You're on side just the small.
just the small.
Michael's on
2
side
zonings.
just the bigger. So I'm hearing a desire to see from different people for 2 different things. So as a result, I strongly suggest that we get both of those appraisals done and we just determine 1 set of rules that we're going to apply to those. 1 set of zoning rules. That would be my recommendation. No? I mean,
Well, I'm not
With
speaking
everybody
for,
else, I mean, I
yeah.
think Cindy and I are only interested in the smallest parcel. It's not clear to me, I know where Michael stands. That's 1. Where's everybody else stand?
Yeah, I would recommend doing the middle one, because I think that will give us the most valuable information, and then also see what the difference is between the 2 zoning.
I think that's what I would go with. Go the middle one and 2 different
Two
types of
zoning.
uses.
well, I don't think it makes sense to, you know, if people have some people have a strong preference for the smaller one, I think we ought to study the smaller one as well.
No,
Both
that's,
numbers.
I would absolutely do the smallest one, but I think it's really important to do the 2 zoning. Because I don't
2 sizes,
know,
2 zones.
absolutely, I don't think a commercial use makes tremendous sense there.
Okay, all right.
And in
So,
terms of the zoning, so
what,
there's,
go ahead, Mike.
I was just trying to remind myself, because I think that what I'm about to say is accurate, but,
I mean, I'm looking at the zoning info right now, if you want me to.
no, not that,
summarize
I'm
this.
trying, I was gonna pull up the map real quick, just, because I'm pretty sure.
You want me to get
One
that?
sec. I am actually going somewhere.
Multifamily houses are permitted, which are different than apartment buildings.
No, not in terms of 3B. 3B is not, yeah. I think that probably the way that would make you to look at, you'd probably do 5B because much of Montgomery Avenue is already 5B. And then you might also do 3C because 3C also already exists on Montgomery Avenue and it's the step up from 3B.
And what is?
You mean 3A?
No.
Three A.
Three
It means
C
3C.
exists on Montgomery
What is
Avenue.
3C?
Three,
Three
up in,
Cs.
look at, it's at, Montgomery and North Wynwood Avenue.
I mean, what does it?
Well, that's on the other side of, that's not.
It is, but it's on Montgomery.
Yeah, here we go.
3C
Thank
is-
you, man.
Oh,
All right, do we have a stand or anything, or are you gonna hold it up? All right.
Yeah.
So the red is 3A, that's basically just single family.
The yellow. up
The
in that corner
yellow
3C.
is 3C, so that is, that is residential, but it allows apartments. And then the purple is
Purple is
5B,
Or 5B.
yeah, which is the other Montgomery Avenue zoning.
So folks, we're looking,
Yeah, we're looking
Here.
right there.
Yeah.
So you can see why I'm suggesting 5B.
yeah.
Yeah.
3C, you know, it's permissive residential. It's residential that has, let's see,
It's basically, if you were going to pick two,
yeah.
then I would say those would be the two. They already exist on Montgomery Avenue. And 3B doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Well, the red is on Montgomery Avenue too, though.
Red is 3A.
The red
that
is
makes
3A.
more sense.
Well, it's on Montgomery, I'm saying if we're using the
Yeah.
logic of how we're doing it, there's a heck of a lot more 3A than there is 3C.
3A is gonna, 3A is basically single family. There's not a lot else that can be done there. And I don't think financially we're gonna get much of a number if we try to sell it for single family housing. It's just,
Those lot-
I don't think it makes sense to do
those are
that.
large lots, I think the minimum.
Minimum lot is new subdivision, 3A, 10,500 square feet.
Yeah, so they could maybe
Out of
put,
step with.
they could put two, maybe, single family houses according to the 3A.
But in 3B, it's
if
multi-use.
it's 3As, you said 10,000 square feet?
3A is 10,500 square feet for
How
new
many
lot
are we?
subdivisions.
Yeah.
I mean, an acre is 43,560 square feet, so you figure
All right, so
you get
four.
4 houses.
Four houses, so we're talking about 4 houses. I mean,
But 3B, John, you just said has multi-family use property, right?
Multi-family house, which is different than an apartment.
Which is
Right.
different.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is that a twin? Is that
No, that's a separate drawing. I think it's
Small,
usually
small
four.
multiplexes up to,
Oh,
up to
okay.
5, but
Up
it
to
tiers
5.
depending on the.
Could you remind me of the sizes of the subdivisions and the smallest in the middle case?
1 acre, 1.5 acre. So, yeah, as Maggie said, that's 40 something, 42,000 square feet for an acre.
43,560.
To be exact.
Yeah,
Alright.
yeah, no.
And this is, and again, this is for our purposes of actually just trying to get an estimate of value. It's not a decision to subdivide the property in any given way.
I just think there's gonna be more variation in the price you get back based on the housing type
Yeah.
than on the
Agreed.
size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to,
There'll be more information, and we're gonna pick 2 options.
Yeah, it will, because it gives you a sense of, yeah, for sure.
You're looking at 2 different variables, really, and
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So from that perspective, I think that I would say if we were looking at 2 variables, it would be 5B and 3C.
the only reason why you wanna look at 2 different sizes is because if it's, individual units, in a larger property, you get more shared amenities like the Elm has.
Right.
But I think at 1 acre, you probably get enough. And I don't think that all of a sudden you're gonna have like a swimming pool because you went up.
It's just more units.
Also,
Well, it just also changes potentially the construction costs, right? Because if you're doing a surface park building versus like structured parking is gonna be what, like $40,000 a space? So it completely changes the way that you approach a property, which completely potentially changes the valuation.
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough of a size difference between the 1 and the 1.5 to warrant doing it.
Well,
Okay.
you don't know till you
That's
know.
my,
Yeah.
what's allowed in a 3C again?
3C is,
residential, but allows apartment buildings.
Okay.
it does
so
not allow commercial or mixed use.
Any other middle housing that you mentioned, like, it would have to be in a 3C then?
It would exist.
Yeah, that, I just want to make sure that would be allowed in 3C.
It is
Which
allowed
one?
in 3C.
Yeah, so 3C is gonna give us more of a residential mix, 5B does
Right.
not. 3C allows detached houses, twin houses, multifamily houses, as John described, cottage, well, not cottages, 'cause it's not historic, apartment buildings, 5,
I think the minimum.
Minimum allowed in new subdivision 3A is
10,500.
10,500 square feet.
yeah,
Possibility of a zoning change that allows for, I don't want to say affordable housing because that creates a different view, but housing that would be, useful and needed within our community for our senior renters, our young people who want to live here who can't afford to live.
I think you get at that if you say that we're asking for, to evaluate an apartment building use.
okay, can I pause for a second? If we talk about the 3B district, which is contiguous, that allows multifamily houses, so you could get the sense of what if it's just small multifamily units, which I think is what you're describing.
But we're not going to be able, so if the policy goal here is to be able to create housing that working families who historically forged the backbone of Narberth can afford, we are not going to get that in that. So if we send them that and tell them to appraise that, it can come back, they'll give us things. There's not a logistical, actual way of a borough of our size to get at that. The way that you would get at that is to have them appraise an apartment building style, because that is the way that that sort of housing is developed today. Unless you're a larger municipality who can do land banking, who can do all of these other things, which we aren't.
So when I talk about this, I talk about not renting, like someone who wants to build equity and purchase. And Maggie, not to put you on the spot for the comprehensive plan, but in 2018, one of the recommendations was different housing types. And we've seen an influx of these $1.5, $1.7 million mansions. And if we have the opportunity on borough property to say, we are going to heed that advice on, again, folks who want to build equity in smaller either starter houses or aging in place smaller house, at either end of that spectrum, and we have an opportunity to utilize that for that, I would be very interested in that. In equity, not just renting, because again,
No,
I've heard
I
so
don't know
many
if I
folks say,
can-
when is it gonna be condos? When do we wanna build equity? And we don't have.
I can tell you that, what I'm hearing is that there are a lot of people who are pretty much our essential workers, our teachers, our healthcare workers, our firefighters. They cannot afford to live here. And
They
I don't
have trouble
think
having
the
making down payments. And you have
Right.
entire groups of people in the history of this country that through a century have been deprived of equity and don't have the ability to make that down payment. But the biggest predictor of whether you can move up in life is the zip code that you're able to move into.
Oh, I agree
Right,
wholeheartedly.
so providing actual pathways, right, like when my grandparents came here, they moved into the workforce housing of the time, right, which was row homes, which were row homes in Narberth, right? And that was their ability to actually get here, and then their children moved up.
Agreed.
And then,
I
and
think
then
we're all on
we
the same
moved up.
page. I want people to be able to buy it
All
and
right,
not
folks.
rent though. is
I am hearing two opposed views here.
It's not an apartment building.
I think that
Correct.
3B is that's the zoning that Sabine currently has, right? That's the zoning the entire street has. That would represent what Cindy and Mike are talking about. It would be twins, it would be multifamily house as the options.
That
I
is
think we
not
should
gonna get us to
propose
those
that,
goals.
and I think we should propose an apartment complex. We should say,
That's fine.
come back with both.
Yeah.
Yep.
Come back with these two
On which
visions.
size property?
What's that?
On the 1 acre or the 1.5?
We're gonna ask for two, I think we decided we do it on the 1.5 acre, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
If we're gonna
I would do the
do-
one, but I'm gonna
Yeah, I'll
compromise. Yeah.
concede the 1.5 if I get the other.
I think that's what I'm hearing from council. Okay, I think you have your direction here. We're gonna
1.5 apartment and a 5B.
3B.
3B.
Just 3B. We're just
Yeah.
saying apartment right now. We're not even gonna worry about mixed use. We're gonna assume that the apartment will be,
Okay,
more.
so-
I mean, the other problem is that we had originally talked about trying to get Wonder Spring into the basement, into the lower floor of that building. So,
Well, that'll just make it worth less, so
Yeah.
at least we'll have an upper bound.
Yeah.
And part of this exercise here is to figure out,
yeah, okay. All right, so we
In other
think
words,
that, we
you
think the apartment building is gonna be the upper bound, and we think that the other is more in keeping with what we're hearing from the neighbors and what I'm hearing from Cindy and Mike here, so,
And just
okay.
to reiterate, this is just to get information. so
Yeah,
that
we're not
we can
doing
start
this.
Yeah, we're not
talking.
doing
Yeah,
anything.
So the whole point is, we get a number back from our appraisal, and that represents how much we would get from doing this, and we have to weigh that against the benefit to the community from turning it all into a park. So that's the whole point of this exercise.
Okay, so just so I can go back and get an accurate quote here, so we're doing 1.5 acres
Yeah,
as the only size option,
yep,
assuming either the 3B zoning, which is the existing zoning, or an apartment-only use. Right, not
that
a
simplifies
mixed
things.
use
Correct.
retail apartment, just apartments.
because we think that, we think the apartment is gonna get the highest possible number if we decided to go that route.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Come
Okay,
back,
thanks everyone.
Yeah.
All right, our second Sabin item. Okay, so this is coming about because council originally had considered whether the building at 201 Sabine, whether it would make sense for the borough to renovate this building, whether it would make sense to do something with the building. And we had determined that, in our opinion, the deferred maintenance costs didn't make it worthwhile for us to continue with our commercial landlord status, of what we're doing with the building. However, different boards and commissions have approached, planning commission and the HARB both have an interest in preserving the building. And we had somebody come to us unsolicited and said, look, we're a school, we are interested in buying and renovating this building to use as a school, which council had a discussion and felt that was reasonable to consider as well. So by allowing the possibility of one group to come in and look at the building, we have to allow others to look in here. If we did decide that this was an appropriate thing, we would have to go through a bid process. So again, this is a fact finding. We are not close to making a decision here. And even if we did decide that this was worthwhile, we would have to put this out to bid rather than selling it to any particular person. So this is determining to what extent we are interested in considering the reuse of the building, adaptive reuse of the building, what sort of tenants would be appropriate, and what would be our expectation for the rest of the space.
While also maintaining and expanding the park.
Yeah, well, also,
Yeah, you
we're not-
skipped over the first
Yeah.
part, which was the most important.
Yeah,
Council
so-
reaffirms its commitment to providing parkland and open space at 201 Sabine Avenue that is equal to or greater than the amount of parkland provided on the site today.
I think if we went this route, it's likely it would be equal to. I think it would be basically the status quo, except the borough would sell the building. I think that would be the likely thing. We would probably take ownership of the park so that the park belongs to the borough, and then sell the building and some of the parking lot, or, we would make sure we control the park. We would sell the building, again, if it financially makes sense to us. So we're trying to figure out what the finances would be on that, and what the rules would be about who we might sell it to and what we might allow. All right, so we got this document in front of us. Michael, do you want to outline the main ideas here?
Yeah, it was basically just to pull together the various different threads on this.